Step into the captivating world of the Behind the Curtain podcast, where your dynamic hosts, John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, bring together a wealth of 60 years of combined experience in healthcare and manufacturing. Join us every week as we delve into intriguing topics, weaving unscripted conversations that promise to take you on an unpredictable and enlightening journey. Gain valuable insights for your continuous improvement adventure as we navigate uncharted territories with enthusiasm and expertise. Welcome to a podcast that goes beyond the ordinary, unraveling the mysteries behind the curtain of knowledge.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Behind the Curtain. I'm one of your co-hosts, John Dyer, and with me is Dr. Mohamed Saleh. And we're here to continue our discussion on training, something we've been talking about now for a couple of weeks. This will be our third week. And today, last week we really talked about how to develop a particular class. Today, we're going to talk more about, at the macro level, how to develop a roadmap of training courses to help people move from not knowing anything to becoming really practiced, knowledgeable people in the areas of lean. So, Mohamed, why don't you start us off? What's been your experience in developing that roadmap?
This has been a roller coaster in my career because I copied a lot of things until I actually knew what I was doing. And I'm going to say, at least my approach now has evolved too, is when I go into organizations, the first thing I need to do is I need to work with the executive team to help them understand what are they saying yes to. Surprisingly, most of my mistakes in the past was the root cause behind it was that we rolled this out and then midway the leadership team was like, that's not what we signed up for. That's on me because I initially didn't teach them what they're saying yes to. What are the behaviors that is going to be expected on this journey? What are the rituals that they're going to have to perform? What does it mean to them? And so I would say the first step is that, you have to make sure that your leadership team understands what are they saying yes to. And it has to be at the principle level, the philosophical level, not just the tools. Don't go there and teach them PyFast. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like what's behind the tool, what's the behavior that they're trying to encourage. And so that would be, I would say the first phase. The second phase, another big mistake I've made in the past, is you can't use a cookie cutter. You can't take one training from one organization and say, this is how we're going to train for everyone. This is my training. I hear that a lot. This is how I conduct training. No, context is everything. And so there has to be a period where you as the teacher have to understand the current state and assess the current state and understand the context of what you're working with. What is the current capabilities of this organization? One of the things I've learned, and I'm just going to use in healthcare, for example, is they're very good at scientific thinking. Their entire career is based on understanding current state, diagnosing it, putting a treatment plan, and then following up on the treatment plan to make sure whatever treatment they gave you is actually meeting the diagnosis. Okay, so when you come here and you start teaching problem solving, they're going to eat that up because that's how they think anyway. Okay, versus someone else who's not thinking this way. So you need to understand the current state. But you also need to understand in that context, they're also very risk averse. And so they get sued a lot of times for doing things. So even if they diagnose something, they're going to look at evidence-based research, best practices, they'll call it. And so coming up with their own idea of trying something completely different that breaks the paradigm that has not been tested before is extremely hard. Yes, they could diagnose pretty well, but they can't really, when they come up with ideas, it's really tough for them to execute on it. Where in manufacturing, it's the complete opposite. What I've noticed at least. And so understand the context that you're working with, I would say, is the second phase. There's no training in that. That's you just being out there in the Gemba, spending sometimes up to 3 months to try and figure out what's going on. Then designing a training that addresses the gaps and capabilities. This is not about certifications. This is about capability building, not certification giving. And too many people, check off, oh, we need X amount of, belts, I'll call them, not to like poke at anyone, but like, it's not about certifications. It's about capabilities. Are you building capabilities? And so, what I have, and this is not a cookie cutter, so I don't want people that listen to this to take this and say, this is what we're doing. But what I've noticed is kind of a common theme in this roadmap is that the first immersion is usually around setting behaviors and principles in the organization of those teams. And so what does it mean for me to be a leader of a team leader or a supervisor or a manager or whatever? What does it mean for me? And so I need to set those behaviors. I need to highlight the rituals and practices that I need to do as a leader. And perhaps how do I lead problem-solving efforts? And in that, how do I make my day visible? So maybe like, how do I run a huddle? That would be like in a first immersion. Then I would advance from that to a second immersion. And this is not, again, cookie cutter, but in the second immersion, I would focus from moving away from setting the behavior to now living them. And so what is the training that I need so I could live these behaviors? What are the things that I need to do so I could live these rituals, that they become hardwired in my calendar, that every single day I'm doing the following things, I'm predictable on what I'm supposed to. I have my own leader standard work. And starting going into how do I create stability in my area? And so for some areas, that might mean that they need better workplace organization, 5S, for example. For some people, that might mean total productive maintenance. Their machines are always breaking down, and that might be the area that requires stability. For others, it might mean that everyone's doing it differently, and we need standard work. We need a repeatable process so that we could use that as a springboard for idea generation, because we're not getting ideas. So that might be in the stability bucket. It might be also inventory management. We're always having part shortages. And so I might need to start looking at how do I create like a simple Kanban two-bin replenishment system or something in that area to create stability. So I would say I sometimes call immersion 2 the activity box. Just in my house, what do I need to fix? And if I notice in my house, we're really good at workplace organization already, I might not be teaching that right now. But if I notice that the equipment maintenance is an issue, and if I notice that inventory is an issue, maybe that's when I need to focus on to create stability. Then there's the third one. And the third one is now, how do I transfer my behaviors? How do I transfer my rituals to the people I'm leading? How do I get frontline staff to start doing their waste walks? How do I get people to start doing autonomous maintenance on their machines? How do I get people to start actually understanding how this two-bin system is working, and they could start teaching it to others? And so I would say the third phase is like, how do I transfer this to other people? And that immersion starts to look at the connections between your activity of your customer, the second activity after you, and your supplier, the activity before you, and start looking at how are these connections. Do I have supermarkets? Do I have communication channels? Are we optimizing each other's work together, or are we doing it in a silo? So at that point, concepts like flow, pull, load leveling might emerge as concepts that I might want to teach in that immersion. I might even go to the point where I start looking at value stream mapping or macro process mapping to understand the holistic perspective, so I understand how I'm contributing to the big picture. I would say that's the third one. And then the fourth phase, I would say, is how am I creating the environment now for the people that I'm actually leading, for them to transfer it to others? And so how are they transferring to their suppliers and customers? How are they transferring it? If I'm an executive and I'm transferring it to middle management, how am I creating the psychological safe environment for middle managers now to transfer it to the people underneath them? And so I would say that fourth phase of training is really looking at how do I create environments to help transfer to others? And this might mean that I might need to understand succession plannings, and I might need to do skip coaching rounds. And this might mean I need to go and observe layers that are beneath or a little bit lower in my chain of command. It might mean that I have to might visit my customers and seeing what they're doing. I might want to go visit my suppliers and see what they're doing and start looking at how do I help create an environment for, my shipping department to work with their receiving department more effectively. How do I work with that executive on the other end so that we could put maybe an event between both of them together, and tell them it's okay to fail fast and it's okay to share costs. So I would say at a macro level, that's kind of a roadmap that I would do.
So Mohammed, that was great, great outline for your roadmap, and several of the things that you mentioned, I would 100% agree with, and of course, there's a few things that I do slightly differently, but let's start with the ones that I agree with. You mentioned about how you know, don't embrace training that just leads to certification. And I totally agree with that. It's like checking a box, and that really irritates me. Again, it doesn't meet the criteria we talked about last week, how much knowledge really gets transferred, how much is really retained, and how much is actually put into use. Yeah, I wrote an article for Industry Week magazine titled, Would Dr. Deming Have Been a Black Belt? And my conclusion was probably he wouldn't have been, because it really went against a lot of his teachings. He talked about knocking down barriers that prevent people from working together or from creating silos. So just even having a belt and someone else not having a belt, that can be a barrier. One of the worst training classes that I ever sat through, I was just auditing the class, so I wasn't participating, but it was a class to help people get certified in a particular part of lean. And all they did was spent the entire first day memorizing terms, memorizing Kanban, memorizing the term Gemba, memorizing the term, Kaizen. Then they took home a practice test and then came back the next day and got graded on their practice test. And then they took the certification test. And that was it, the entire training course. And I'll guarantee you that, probably as little as 2 or 3 days later, they wouldn't remember most of that. It was like memorizing for the test. And then once the test was done, they were done.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of just training to get certified. One thing though, to your list of things that I would add, I do strongly believe that everyone in the organization should get the basic training. Now, whether you do that through, video classes, or, in 1 hour chunks or half-day chunks. The class I do is actually a 2-day class, and it's very hands-on, but it's just a overview
Fundamentals. Yeah.
of all of what lean is and Six Sigma is. And the reason that I encourage my clients to take everybody through that class, even though that's a big investment in time, resources, and so forth, is that coming out of that, you now have a common language that everybody now knows. Oh yeah, when we say process map, I remember that from the training class. So when they get asked to be on a Kaizen team or a huddle group, and you start, using those terms, it's not like you're speaking in foreign language. They now know, oh, okay. So they're in the know. Everyone's in the know. There's no separation from the, has and have nots. The other thing is they have a common set of shared experiences. Oh, what did your class do when they had to solve this problem or in that particular activity? And so it's a bonding experience for them,
Before
because
you
they
go
all have
further,
had that same set of experiences.
yeah, before you go
So
any further there, I want to just ask a question, I think, because I've done it two different ways, and I think there's value of both. Um, I 100% agree that fundamentals are needed. Like everyone in the organization needs that fundamentals. What I have pivoted to now is that in my immersions with the team leads and the supervisors and the up the chain of command, one of the expectations is before the next immersion that I aid them or give them a training that they have to deliver to the frontline staff.
Right.
And I then go observe to see, or have someone else go observe that's been trained already to go observe and give feedback to the individual. How effective was your training to your frontline staff? And it's usually like lunch and learns or something like that. I've also done it where, especially really early in the journey, and people are still not really knowing what this is all about, and they think that this lean is delegated, and they're not going to be the trainers. That's what we hire you guys for. And so there have been times where I would teach the front lines the fundamentals, and sometimes put them through like 4 half-day classes over like a period or a full 2-day class of just the basic fundamentals, because I think that common language, I 100% agree, needs to be established. I'm getting a little bit more success, even though it's so much harder, with empowering, I'm using the word very deliberately here, empowering the people that go through the immersion training as leaders to be the ones to deliver it themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the only way to go if the organization is quite large, right?
Yeah.
In order to propagate that knowledge down.
That is true. Yep.
Again, I do think it's important what you said about having someone there to coach them, because not everybody's a good trainer.
Correct.
Not everybody has the patience or understands the importance of the give and take, or like what we talked about last week, all the different ways to engage people. So if they just go and say, oh, I'm going to do a lunch and learn, and I'm going to talk for an hour and tell you, and basically do a mind dump of all my knowledge, well, they'll retain the first 10 minutes, and then after that they'll be checked out. So yeah, as long as it's done intentionally and make sure that the knowledge is shared in the correct way, I would totally agree with you. So again, it's basically having that shared knowledge and experience. The other thing that you mentioned that I 100% agree with, and actually my whole approach is built around this, is what I like to call the teach to fish, right? Is to, we're not there to hold everyone's hand 100% of the time. You gotta turn them loose. And the only way to do that is not only transfer the knowledge, but transfer enough of your experiences, coaching, facilitation skills, so that they can pick up the ball and run on their own, and then build on their own knowledge and successes. I always talk about, and I know you have a similar approach when you were consulting, is to, basically work yourself out of a job as quickly as possible. And when I get invited back to an organization that I may not have been there for a couple of years and see them thriving, that's very cool, because then I know that the teach to fish was effective.
I want to just comment really quick on something that you just said that I think is critical, and this is the importance of pivoting as a teacher. One of my immersions, I had done the first immersion of teaching problem solving, teaching how to run a huddle, teaching what are the behaviors and rituals, and then we went to the immersion 2, which was around stability. And as I was talking in the beginning of the lecture, I noticed there was a huge gap still in the behaviors, a huge gap still in the rituals, a huge gap still in the problem solving. And the second immersion was all repeating immersion 1, but getting into more details now, because they've tried it, they've been struggling with it. So many questions were coming out. As a teacher, you can't be like, well, I have a curriculum I have to deliver for this wave. No, your job is to build capabilities. If the capabilities aren't built, the problem is you. And so you have to figure out what gaps that you do need to fix, because the more important thing is not to check off a box that you did this immersion. The more important thing is that you built this capability. And so highly advise people that as they go through these pockets of learning cycles, that they're willing to pivot when they notice that capability isn't built.
Yeah, so be flexible. All right, very good. Well, that's our time for this week.
Awesome.
We'll continue our discussions next week. We hope that you'll continue to watch our videos and be sure to hit the subscribe button and leave us your comments. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
As we draw the curtains on another fascinating episode, we wanted to express our gratitude for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you're hungry for more captivating and thought-provoking discussions with John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a beat. Until next week, keep exploring, stay inquisitive, and stay inspired. See you on the next Behind the Curtain adventure.